All right, so let's get going. So I think Kendrick talked about last week, so for the first couple months of 2020, we're going to kind of talk about back to the basics, operational basics and improvements, and not necessarily improvements, we're going to go do all the stuff that generally supposed to be done on all our projects. But before, we have a new employee joining us today, Bob Brakeman, for those of everybody that doesn't know Bob. Bob is joining us today to sprinkle some wisdom on us.
So I want to share my, I'll pass these around. You all know Dick Arnold?
Chairman of ARCO.
He's the AR of ARCO. Him and I were buddies 40 years ago. These are job costs. This is how we used to do it. They give you a list of checks. You might have 45 checks. It was up to you to figure out what bucket they went in. So we had to add a cross and down on a calculator, 10 key. So the next time you want to bitch about doing pass this around to you. He cleaned out his basement. He said, next time those rangers bitch about job costs, show them this.
In pencil. All right, so today we're going to talk about buyout, project buyout, pretty important. So in that session, where Ted's going to up here and preach to everybody about what to do and how to do it. It's supposed to be a lively discussion with those experienced in here that have done it. So if we're experienced in here, we've probably done it good and bad in both ways, and we probably have, just like with anything, we found better ways to do it from our failures, not from our success. So, right, anytime you're buying something out, scope of work, project in general, you have to have a strategy before you're sitting down with that subcontractor. What are some strategies that we should employ during the project buyout?
Knowing the total scope that you're trying to buy.
Well, there's a great one. How do we, because what do we do as a construction management firm?
Buy work.
We buy work. We do not self-perform work. So we all have a set of documents, right? Big set of plans, small set of plans. We have to buy everything on that set of plans, and or in addition to anything that's in our contract with the owner that may not be on that set of plans. If we told them we were going to do something that's not there yet, or we told them we weren't going to do something that's there, or whatever it is. So how do we, to Andrew's point, how do we know what's on that set of documents to buy?
Check sets.
Check sets, right? So the strategy number one is to have really good check sets, right? Scope of work, as you're going through your check set, go through your buyout forms. Everybody has a different practice of maybe getting all that information on your buyout forms. How I used to do it was, as I'm going through my check set, you just have your buyout forms or whatever you're doing, and as you see something you need to buy, right, you just put it on the buyout form then, not later on when you're trying to remember what it was. So yeah, your goal is to walk in that subcontract or that buyout meeting with our buyout form with 100 other things on it that you need to buy, right? So, but what are some other strategies? Obviously, we have to buy everything that's on the document.
Know what you want to get out of them. Know what they bid the best that you can, and then know what you want to get out of them.
Yeah, you have to have, there's something more than what they have on their bid, scope of work and a number. That's generally what their bids are that you want, probably. I want more scope than they bid for that same number, or you might be buying a schedule or a better schedule than they might. You might have communicated to them during the bid process. I don't know. So you have to know what your strategy is going into that meeting. And when you walk away from that first negotiation with them, you have to know what you want at the end of it. And you may not have it, but there may be a path forward to get it. You don't want to walk out of there and go, generally you don't want to walk out of a buyout meeting and shake somebody's hand and it's a done deal. I would venture to guess 9 times out of 10, you shouldn't be awarding that. There shouldn't be an award during that buyout meeting unless they're nodding their head the whole time to you, say yes, 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 then maybe get them on board before they walk out of there and figure out what they just did. If you find one of those, you might want to sign them up real fast. So again, know what you're trying to do in that buyout meeting. Anybody else have any?
You hit on it, the schedule, right? That's the only time when you sit down with them before they ink something where you can get them held to contract dates. So if you don't have your schedule done before you start buyout, it's hard to get those dates to where it's going to meet your total schedule. So know what you have to, the maximum schedule that you can agree to on their activities that they're doing and get that broken out.
Which includes manpower,
Yeah.
crew size.
Phasing, logistics, that's the thing, they know how you're gonna build it.
So all of that, everything everybody said is spending the time, right? And phasing and logistics is huge, because the plans don't show that, right? Generally, we create that, how we want to build the project. There's usually not, most of our projects aren't generally phased by the architect, right? They're just, here's a building, go build it, and we phase. We create wing A, wing B, wing C, north to south, east to west, whatever it is. We create that, and in a perfect world, that information goes out with the bid documents, and that's how they bid it. So if you don't have that during the bidding process, and we've created it since they bid it, you have to buy that during the course of the buyout meeting. And if you don't think there's costs associated with them not knowing, don't buy it and then go try and get them to do it after you get them subcontracted. They'll come through and say, wait a minute, I meant to go from left to right. You want me to go right from left. That's $25,000. And then now you're automatically renegotiating some that you don't have time to renegotiate stuff like that, right? Because you got an addendum or a CCD already that's 20 pages you're trying to press.
So Ted, one great thing about where we are right now as a company is we're not really doing too much hard bid, right? So we're not getting a bunch of flooring numbers and trying to plug the low guy. And I've found some success with, I buy it as you bid it, right? So you're able to get their bids, and you should know if hopefully they filled out your bid form, we did the bid form right. But if, like the concrete guy, you have sub-base rock, you have backfill footings, things like that, you can email back and forth with the guy or call him up on the phone, get that stuff, because usually we're chasing a GMP number or chasing a GMP we've already signed up for, so that when you do come time to buy out, you're not sitting there checking the box saying, oh, you have rock, or you don't have rock, you did this, that, and the other, because a lot of times they're like, oh, no, I don't have to, I'll just be mad. Well, if you already know who's really the guy, that's when you can start really negotiating, right? That's when you can sit down and say, hey, you're not necessarily the guy, but let's talk about phase, let's talk about schedule, the big items, not really checking the box, make sure they, going down the buyout form. So buying out as your business can be a strategy where you're getting rid of all the stuff you're the things you just got to find out.
So that is a great point with a lot of these projects where the client comes in. CA is a perfect example. It's on the senior living or this Parkland Plaza job or whatever it may be. Like we kind of awarded the job before we put internal numbers together before we even went straight. So yeah, you kind of know the scope and you kind of guiding them where to go. So whenever you have that final buyout meeting, it's not like, you're right, we're hard bidding it. We have hard bids due on Tuesday, and we have to go to work on the next Tuesday, so we got to bring 3 foundation guys in here. So it just depends on each individual circumstance of the project that we're going through.
Know your risk. Know your risk of your contracts and buy out the most critical guys first. A lot of times that's MVPs, the long lead items, and sitting down with them and making sure that everybody's apples to apples.
So when I was with Bob, what Bob would say, still wet behind the ears whenever I started building all the retail down in the valley, and everybody's probably heard this and made this mistake, or if you haven't, don't do it. Masonry walls, load bearing on the back, so I got that bought out, and Kevin Snowman said, okay, when are the hollow metal door frames coming as we were pouring foundations? Well, why do we need hollow metal door frames? You needed welded hollow metal door frames to put up before the mason comes. So, learned my lesson the hard way, so we ended up not doing it the right way. So, but you're right, the risk. What is going first? What is longest lead item? who may or may not wait as long, somebody may say, hey, look, can you let me know where I'm at, because I'm bidding this next job next week, and I can't take on both of them, so if I'm in the running, whether or not, that may not be critical scope of work to buy until you don't have that guy anymore, when you go to call him, and he's like, oh, sorry, I'm booked for 2020, and your second guy is 20% more, and we did not communicate that to the owner, because we thought we were gonna buy that guy, so there's all kinds of different strategies you can have. The key is make sure you have one when you go into the buyout and figure out what you want.
One other one I think we should talk about is, like, we say buy everything, but you should buy everything plus the random ancillary other stuff, like your landscaper, does he have a flagpole? Right, there's flagpole contractors out there, but get them to pick it up. Or interior nowhere guy, like the other random stuff, because you don't want to be writing POs to landscape forms for benches, having to pay deposits and get insurance, and paying use tax because they won't charge tax to us. And you think about all of that extra work, and then you gotta go find somebody to overpay to install it because you bought a furniture landscaper, right? It's probably not any more dollars on bid day to get a furniture install bench number from your landscaper, but they never include that kind of stuff. So think about what other headaches you're going to have that you can just touch once instead of having to touch them 10 times down.
So time expectations, right? Don't buy as needed, which is kind of the opposite of what we said, depending on your situation. This gives 2 to 4 weeks. So that was in the old days of you bid it and then you go buy everything. To Kyle's point, you guys, depending on your situation, should be buying the project as scopes of work or packages are released, right? So when you do get to a point where you have everything bid, you just have the ancillary stuff, that last bid package ready to buy. As soon as you go to contract with the owner or have the ability to, Anthony's a great example of what, we just got our contract on Charlottesville, CA, and Charlottesville, Virginia last week. Signed. Anthony probably had hit send the next day, and probably 15 subcontracts went out the door because he had all that stuff bought, ready to go, subcontracts written. You don't have to wait for the signed owner contract. Now, before we physically send out the subcontract to the owner, yes, but you get all that upfront work done and just hit go, hit send when you're ready to do it, right? This is a huge one that I'm not sitting in a bunch of buyout meetings, but I can't stress enough, right? You buy it, and then what's the next thing that either makes you successful or unsuccessful? Whether materials show up on site, what's that process? Submittals and procurement, right? So if you can buy the scope of work, schedule, install in the field to your liking, but if you don't buy the submittal and procurement process to your liking, the install time in the field is going to have to be condensed. So I think this probably needs to become more, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but we need to focus on this and really nail the submittal and procurement process down with our subcontractors. And, if we do a good job of that, maybe we need to take it to the next level, holding them accountable for that process that's laid out in the subcontract. If they tell you, because anybody will say in a buyout meeting, I can have them submittals in 2 weeks, right? That's the easy answer. Well, resolve the buyout meeting in 2 days and then release them and get them on the 2-week calendar. That's probably something that can be improved upon around here. Not rush. That means kind of the whole point of it. Do your check set, spend the extra time up front, be prepared and confident when you're going into the buyout meeting so you know more about the project than the subcontractor. That's usually when you get them kind of like, oh my God, these guys know what they're doing, know what they're talking about, know my scope more than I do. I better just start nodding yes, giving them what they want. Obviously, before actual project operations take off, if you're so. But sometimes, again, back to the way some of our jobs work, this isn't the case because we're out there doing a bunch of site work, footings and foundations while they're still finishing the drawings, just the nature of the type of delivery method we've chose. You know, naturally, a lot of these projects are really messing around with finishes and stuff like that, so in this time, which is what I just said, if you can get owners to do early bid packages.
The last two may be necessary evil, but they suck. So if you let that happen, it makes it harder on you.
If you have to go, right.
If you do operations while you're trying to do buyout, so I guess
If
try to do
you're
everything
not-
up above and it won't happen down below, but sometimes it's a necessary evil if this happens.
If the drawing schedule doesn't force this, don't do this because it's, the architect has held up the drawing. I mean, if you have your bids and buyouts and you put yourself in that position, he's right, it sucks because you're trying to do project management on an operational project and then you barely have enough time to do that, much less still have buyout meetings.
And travel.
And travel.
A little bit.
So here's kind of what we talked about a little bit. So buy hard, what does that mean for everybody sitting in this room that maybe hasn't bought a job out? What is the definition? How do we look at that? What does buy hard mean?
Buy a complete scope.
What does that mean? How do you do that?
Try and get as much
I think it's holding accountable for what your expectations were. So we always go back to bid forms, right? Complete bid forms will tell you exactly what you're looking for, that, I always say, concrete guy to pick up, right? You sit down and he's like, oh, I didn't have that. It's like, well, it was in the bid form, your competitor just picked it up. You're not saying, hey, I need you absolutely to throw in that 20 grand, but it's like, hey, you're here at the table because you're competitive. You're telling me, you're listing all these things you don't have, you're about to not be at the table anymore. More colorful words will pick up on that and kind of know where they're supposed to be.
So, Pete, I'm going to put you on the spot. You've been sitting in a lot of buyout meetings on residents and with bodies. So what are some of the things that you guys have been doing in residents?
Well, it's kind of like Adam was saying about, getting a landscaper to pick up the land, the bench in the courtyard or whatever, just things that if you don't, all of a sudden you got a ton of little items that you usually lose money on, whereas you could have gained them if you bought it all out hard with one guy.
So there's a difference between buying hard and shopping bids, right? So we don't shop bids, right? I mean, I kind of brought up the Houston Astros thing purposely because those guys got fined and fired for cheating. We consider bid shopping cheating. We probably won't fine you, but you can get fired for bid shopping around there. So what is bid shopping?
Guys, at this number, can you beat it?
Right? So we don't call, somebody calls up and go, well, where do I need to be? You need to be low. You need to have the complete scope of work and be low. They don't call somebody up and say, hey, can you cut $100,000 off your number to beat this guy? Because we wouldn't want an owner to do that to us, and that we wouldn't want us to do it to that sub.
On the flip side, you have subs, and this is why you award it before you notify people, but subs will call you and say, hey, if I cut 10 grand, will that give me the job? Tell them it's not the list. If I did that to you and the opposite situation, I can't do that. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, so our job is to Kyle's point is like, go through the scope, and if they say no, they have an opportunity in that meeting to say yes and no on everything you ask. Just like every time a client calls us up, we have an opportunity to say yes or no on scope of work or whatever it is they want us to include. If we say yes to something that we don't think we have currently in our bid to them, that's the risk we took on. And then we may win, we may lose. It's no different than that. We're all in the risk business, just like the subcontractors are. They make decisions sitting at the table with us to get backlog, get work, develop relationships, just like we do with clients. So it's the same thing.
It also comes down to, your unit costs. You got some guy you're sitting across the table from, he's got a unit cost down the line. You should say, what's going on here? This unit cost is what I'm used to.
Yeah, and if we're getting the information from them on bid day, quantities, unit pricing, you could say, well, this guy's got 10,000 square feet, you got 15, somebody's wrong, and then your unit, why is your unit cost here? I mean, they've got to get, our goal is to get everybody apples to apples, right? And get everybody leveled or aligned with scope and everything with what you want, so you can make an educated decision. That's why I say it's rare that you should walk out of a buyout meeting and have your answers, because if you're looking at multiple guys, you're gonna have to get all that information back and then make a decision after the time.
So when we call these guys in, do we tell them that they have to have their estimate? Or do you just tell them, come in with your estimate? If you don't have your estimate, you sit down, it'll be a very short meeting.
We should be, yeah, they should be bringing their estimate.
People are the buyouts, buyout calls. So and then we used to tell them, we're not gonna shop numbers, you're one of two low, if you're $100 low, you're gonna get this job. They said, doesn't have something, it's like, guess maybe you might have to think about that.
But we also have an obligation, is what we say, is lowest qualified bidder, right? I mean, we have an obligation, right, to like by price, schedule, quality, safety. At the end of the day, I mean, ideally, the lowest price has all of that stuff as well that we want. I mean, I know we've made decisions where we paid a little bit more for a faster schedule. I mean, you have to weigh the return on that. Is it worth getting the masonry walls up 2 weeks faster for $10,000 or whatever it is? Sometimes it is. Or that, because that sub has more manpower, and he has said, that's my number, that's my final number, I'm not going any lower, but he's 10 grand higher, we might make a decision to go with that guy. So just because a guy ends up being low, it's lowest qualified bidder, we get to define what qualified from our perspective, and every job is different. That means something on every job, depending on what it is. So we get to define.
Don't be afraid to call out their exclusions. Sometimes they throw out general exclusions everywhere, and you sit there and start going through it, and they realize that they made some dumb errors, and they'll get it all crossed out. So when you get the buyout down the road or actual signing, you know exactly what they've excluded as well.
That's how you tell, right? The easiest way to tell differences in scope of work is read everybody's exclusion, right? Generally, they have the same stuff included, but once you read the exclusions, that's usually going to find company general stuff, or it could be project-specific stuff, right? So, I don't know, some market, some drywall guy may pick up the wood blocking, some drywall guy may not. I don't know, making stuff up, but if you don't read their exclusions, you're not going to find out if it's excluded, and you're going to compare an apples to oranges.
That's usually where you find a scope gap too,
Yeah.
Whenever you read somebody's extremely specific exclusion that they included on that bid.
Some people over highlighted.
Yeah.
Because it's something we have to buy,
Yeah.
that they excluded, so somebody else has to include it, whether it's somebody within their same scope, or, I always say, if you can figure out how to get the electrician to do the painting, I mean, we can buy with whatever, with whoever we want. So I challenge somebody to figure out how to get that one done.
Plumbing with framer.
It might look better than, you can buy a plumber and a framer together if you want. Dave bought a plumber and a framer.
Anthony,
So this is what Brett just said, unit cost and bid breakdown. Gut feeling, right, always 9 times out of 10, after you meet with somebody, your gut, kind of think the guy's a shyster, probably a shyster. Walks like a duck, talks like a duck, probably a duck. So,
Only by hired ducks, so.
So here's, if you hire a duck, not a good duck, one that somebody's gonna shoot down later this week, well, let's make sure we communicate to the rest of the team that this is probably a risky set. And don't make it think it's gonna get any better. So like, sit down with the superintendent and your whole team, make sure we let the owner know if we're still in a situation that we're negotiating, like, look, we could hire this duck or this goose or whichever one's better, I don't know, but just make sure everybody knows. I mean, we can't go hire the most qualified, expensive sub, or we would not get any work. And that's the challenges that we get paid for a lot, is to hire the challenging subcontractors. But as long as everybody knows and we know what we're managing with and we're working against, and you might have to drag them across the finish line.
Well, I think you get into it later, another slide set, but the qualification form, everyone's familiar with that, right? And sending it out, the qualification form, especially with all these out-of-town jobs, new places we've never been before, these risky subs. It's like, that's gotta be a must, if those big subs fill it out.
So, yeah, we'll go through that, but I would talk a little bit more, about that in
And we
detail.
have the owners take the risk of a low sale rate, because we did that years ago.
So that is something as an organization we need to do better on and communicate that information. Like, we are in a risk business, like I said, just like the owners are, but we shouldn't, if we know there's a risky sub and we know there's a 20%, 30% gap, 40% gap between a low number and the second guy, the owner should be part of that decision and discussion. Like, look, we bought this guy out, but we've never used him before. We don't think he's 100% qualified. He's 30% low. We can all agree to his bonding rate's 5%, which is not good. We can pay to bond in. We could put the delta between him and the second guy as contingency, and we only use that contingency to help supplement this guy. But those are all discussions that we should be having with the client, so they're all aware. So when it goes south, they're not surprised either when that contractor goes south. Hey, this guy's going south. We're going to use that contingency that we line itemed in the proposal to get this guy across the finish line. Or they may say, no way, I'm willing to spend the delta to go to the second guy. I doubt it, but.
They did that at Tallgrass Court. And we had 5 ducks we told Harrison we weren't gonna use, that the little guy was carrying. And the day they hired us, I just used the guys we wanted to use.
Some of this we've talked about, preparation is key. You guys hit on all this stuff, sub preparation. To Bob's point, bring the estimator, who may not be the decision maker, so these are probably 2 different people. If they're, depending on your scope, if they're MEPs, big MEP project, they'll probably have a foreman. Probably won't know who that person is, but some of them might, have that guy or gal at the table.
On the estimator, it's good to have there because you can ask him point blank, what were you confused on? What have you just thrown money at? I've been pretty successful about pulling some budget out of there and explaining things a little further, because sometimes they're rushed just like anybody else, and they may not look into something and say, oh, that's a $30,000 item, and bucket it into something when they're not exactly sure. So you get him at the table, the one that put the numbers together, and sometimes you can carve money out by better defining.
Which is exactly what we do with clients, except we itemize that stuff to clients. Like if we don't know, we come up with an educated guess and call in allowance, right? Subcontractors, to Jeremy's point, do the same thing, but they don't itemize their bids like that to us and say, hey, got $30,000 wrapped overweight for this. Hopefully I make money on it. But that's to Jeremy's point. You get that stuff out of them.
So if we're not bringing the estimator in, or if a guy shows up without his estimate, I'd say we're going to reschedule this. So then let me tell you how the buyout forms came about. We started in '84, we didn't have a buyout form in 1990. That's because I was tired of teaching people how to buy out a job. So we're going to Rochester, Minnesota, and the pilot was a young engineer who did not make it. And so we said, well, we'll just do a buyout form for each CSI. Well, what's the first question on the buyout form?
What is it? Per plan. Per plan spec.
No, that is not what's it.
Dollar amount?
No.
Like your bid?
What's included?
Yeah, tell me what you have in your bid. You guys should know that by now. And the reason that question is there is because if that guy's, well, let me go through my estimate here. What's your estimate? Tell me what you got in the job. And pretty soon he's going to say, well, I got the haul off the spoils. Oh, really? What are your spoils? What are you going to do? Well, my brother-in-law needs it down the street, so we take it from him. How much you got in there? $5,000. Usually the spoils here, I'll take that credit. But you got to get them talking. You don't want to be the first one to talk. You don't want to be the guy that's prepared. You don't want to be charging in there to buy that job out. You get them to talk, tell you what's in the bid. some guys will do better at it than others, but that's why that question is on there. And the other questions by CSI were questions that we saw, I'm sure it's been changed in the last 30 years, but, you know, for different CSI codes. And then the remaining ones were, that you go through the second, third, fourth, fifth bids and look at what Judge talked about, what, I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, he doesn't have it, maybe the low guy doesn't have it. So that's, I think, how you prepare when you get ready. But you tell those guys, don't show up here without your estimate. We're only talking to 2 people, we're gonna award this thing tomorrow. We're not shopping bids. You got one chance to get this, that'd be low bids.
So we've hit on this stuff. Here's one that, what change orders came up on past similar projects? So, CA senior living, so let's keep you as, because we got a lot of that stuff going on, right? Or senior living in general. Wood frame stuff, wood frame hotels. They go to the last project that we did, go to the PM and grab their job book or look at all the change orders that were written to all the subs. That either we missed during buyout, was missed on the plans. I mean, you can buy stuff, I think Adam or somebody said that isn't on the plans. I mean, if there's stuff that we know we always have to do on this project that isn't generally on the plans, we can buy it. To Nathan's point, exclusions, don't gloss over, right? Spend as much time on those as the inclusion. Very good bullet point, Bob.
And move it to the top.
Get them talking. And then this, right, I mean, they're gonna lie to you. Just know they're gonna lie to you. But this whole 1099 and piecemeal orders, we have to, I think, get really better at understanding that during the buyout process of who are you sitting across the table from. And if it's a broker, which it probably is, we just have to have them tell you that, like, look, none of my guys work for me, they're all 1099 guys. I mean, that's a decision that we get to make after, and again, that's the market we're in, but we have to know what our risks are associated with that.
That might be one of the decisions where you maybe have a number 2 guy that, you know, that's where the.
Well, that's how we got nailed him. Yep.
Yeah.
Those guys just went across the street.
Yeah.
But do you see that very much?
Like which street? Yeah. Framers, drywall, carpenters, floors,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd take a water out or somebody like that if you had to, or give that risk to the owners.
Well, and that's part of the discussion we need to have. I mean, those are the guys that you're gonna find that are extreme, that are the low guys. There's a decision that needs to be made on those guys. And some of the guys literally, and Brad or Mike can probably speak to this more, they'll run their 1099, let's use a framing crew, 1099 guys through and do the show work, and then they have a crew of employees that come back and spend time cleaning up. I liken it to a steel erection crew, the guys that set the steel, and then there's the detail crew, so that's kind of made it down to the...
Those are the good 1099, right?
Right.
Well, that's what you understand. I mean, there's not too many companies out there, especially these non-union market buildings, like that's for example, where the guy's like, no one carries 250 drywall anymore. Right. They just don't. He's like, I got 50 guys on my staff. I'm on 1099 the rooms. There's, 187 rooms. He said, then I'm at seeing my own guys go buy them and do all the work. I know they're not going to do. He's open and honest, had a plan for us, and we're like, okay.
And if that's the route you end up going, though, the discussion needs to be, okay, how many rooms are you have ready for your guys to show up? You need to understand the logistics of them coming on site, if that's a risk to take. You're not going to get those guys to show up unless you got half the floor for them. And then you got to keep that floor open for them, they're going to go somewhere else, so.
So,
if you dive into that, there's a lot of things to figure out before you
Yeah.
The other one too, you gotta find out, make sure they're getting paid. Typically, they're, different companies, and sometimes the guy you got the contract with sometimes has a difficulty paying the other company that he's bringing.
You'll know if they're not getting paid if they won't show up.
Yeah.
They're out in your office.
Every 7 days, they're gone.
Yeah, I found too, you have to ask that question several different ways. I rarely get the right answer the first time with these guys. You ask, are you going to use your own guys? And they're going to say yes, because it's part of their 10 different crews that they've used. And ultimately, you almost have to ask the people that are installing the drywall, on the top of the check, does it say, Acme Drywall on the top of it? Like, well, no, I pay whoever, and he pays the guy as well. Now
So
you got
that guy gets
you've got
W-2 from you?
Yeah.
And
because almost every time you ask if it's their guys, they'll say yes. So you have to dig a little deeper.
Best way to
What's that?
control that
Yeah,
is they come in for their.
Because I've had a bunch of them.
Because Rick keeps on hiring Escobar. No, it's Drywall Enterprises.
It's not Escobar.
No, it's Drywall Enterprises, sorry.
Still shows up as Escobar on the caller ID.
Same guy.
All right, this is important as well. So I'm hoping, and our subcontract agreement should be part of all of our bid document, invitation to bid that goes out. So by default, when they submit our bid, they should have agreed to our subcontract. I'm not naive enough to know that none of them have looked at it or anything, that haven't worked with us before. So when they either, in best case, prior to buyout, you send it to them and say, hey, look, before you come in, bring any comments to our subcontract agreement with you. At worst, have them walk away and go, this is what I'm going to expect you to sign in its entirety as it is written. So take a look at it and let me know if you have any problems. Don't wait till you send it out with their award, and that's the first time they send our subcontract agreement. You've lost power and leverage. All power and leverage is now in their hands. Because you need them probably more than they need you right now. So they're going to take the opportunity to work with us. So get this in their hands, have them give you an understanding of any issues with it prior to award. Insurance requirements, same thing. Sample templates should be part of all our invitation to bid. Payment terms, all this stuff is part of the negotiation. We should never, I shouldn't never say never, but by quantities, we're buying scope, right? Never buy 10,000 square feet of drywall. Now, I understand if you're writing a purchase order for benches, and everybody can agree to the number of benches or the number of this or that. Doors is probably another thing, but like general production stuff, we don't buy quantities, right? Who's right? You or them, right? So we're not in the unit cost business like MoDOT or whoever, some of those government.
And also if their bid has quantity after quantity.
Just let them know.
Like, I'm buying the scope,
this is for evaluation.
Yeah.
But also check it.
Yeah,
Don't go into it if they're off or not.
Right, the point is you're buying scope and that's for accounting purposes only and to review and compare apples and oranges. But when you're writing your subcontract, you're gonna say furnish and install all drywall, not furnish and install 8,000 square feet of drywall, right?
I always think on roofers though, like piping penetrations, stuff like that, they never show them all that you're gonna need.
So that's why I kind of clarified, I don't always say ever, because sometimes they're not, if they're not creating the penetrations, if I'm them, that way your mechanical guy will poke 100 more holes in the roof and he's got it. So 9 times out of 10, you're buying scope. On occasion, you might buy a quantity. This is a big no-no. So Article 1.6, right, is where you write their scope of work after you bought it out. There should not be, in Ted's mind and Ted's opinion, any markups to that scope of work when it comes back. Right? Is there a reason why there would be something in Article 1.6 that they would mark up? My point is we shouldn't be sneaking anything in that we didn't talk about at buyout or on the phone or the email or whatever. That sets a bad precedent with your subcontractor because they're going to go, okay, this guy's, I haven't even started working with him or her and he's trying to sneak stuff in on. So if there's something that you're like, you're right, and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that, but call the guy up and have the conversation and go, hey, look, we didn't talk about this, but I'm gonna write this into your subcontract agreement. They're gonna find out about it sooner or later, even if they don't read our subcontract agreement, because you're gonna want them to do it 6 months later, and they're gonna go, we didn't have it. And then you're gonna go, yes, you did, I put it in your subcontract agreement. And then your relationship is gone south, and they're gonna stop what they're doing. Sub-qual forms and bonding capacities. I don't think there's capacity there. But there is a subcontractor qualification form, and bonding capacity. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that here at the end too, of some of the questions you guys could ask. Schedule, we talked about that. Don't let them dictate to you what the schedule is. You have to dictate to them what you want, preferably during the bidding process. If you have a schedule that you need and want, tell them. We talked about submittals. We talked about manpower, multiple crews, how you guys phase it. Durations, not dates. Why should you buy durations and not starting foundations on January 21st? Why should you not put that in there? Subcontract agreement. Don't make that perfect. 9 times out of 10, you do that for every subcontractor, that's a perfect world scenario, right, based on your schedule. So start foundations, mobilize start foundations 3 days after receipt of all permits or whatever it may be, and then you have 10 days to complete all foundation work. But if you say January 21st, then somebody's got to write somebody a delay letter without even starting work. Unless you're early. Unless you're early. That's why but you got to say after receipt of whatever it is, and then the Mason or whatever it is. Just be careful with dates. Number of workers, I'm also hesitant to dictate to them how many workers they need to do the scope of work. I don't care if they need 50 drywallers or 1 drywaller to hang 10,000 square feet, as long as it meets our duration. It's not really, now there's some art to this. You have to ask them how many men and people and workers they have to do the job. So if they say, oh yeah, I got 1 drywaller, I'm gonna hang that whole building, it's like, well, then you probably are smart enough to know that that's not the right answer. But we kind of know when they need more manpower on site, so just get the information from them. But again, it's not my job to tell them whether or not they need 8 or 11 electricians to do the scope of work. We know we need it done in this time frame. Now,
Also know if you're gonna need a second crew, or depending on how your schedule's going, a second utility crew out there at a certain point. Here's when that's gonna happen.
And to Bob's point, let them tell you, start talking and tell you, this is how I'm gonna do this many guys, and I'm gonna be over here while I'm working over here. And you're just sitting there, somebody's writing all this stuff down while they're talking.
You can list that out specifically in that schedule area though. So, for example, Adam and I were having a call with our friend today, where I think if we kind of came to the conclusion we were a little more specific on when we expected them to go down and start punching the wood building, as opposed to focusing on an overall duration on what we need them done. Probably would have been a lot easier argument to have. So if you expect the crew to start punching when they've finished framing the second floor, start framing third, put that in there. If you expect that of the crew in any area in the phasing or sequencing, make sure you're really specific. Then it's not, because they're always going to tell you, well, I'm going to meet my overall duration. Well, that's great. That doesn't help you out getting ahead of where they were anticipating.
Understand their work schedule too. You know, some guys think they can do stuff on 5/8 and everybody else is telling you 6/10.
Right.
Could be a bigger issue.
Well, then know if they're working if they say they're working 4/10, that, and tell them, no, you're working 5/8, wherever you, 4/10, but okay. That's beneficial.
To Adam's point on the 4/10s, out of town, that doesn't work well. You know,
7/10 works better.
in Indiana, 7/10 are so much better. But we ran into, we had some St. Louis guys, and you get the 4/10s, well, they're not gonna show up until noon on Monday, and they're leaving at noon on Thursday, so you really get you know, you get 3.5 days out of them because they're wanting to travel and get back home. And, you know, they don't want to work until 5 and then have a 5-hour drive. So I would strongly caution 410s out of town with out-of-town subs.
Yeah, and if you got a couple of subs, you know, your major subs, like your MEPs, that need to work a 610, you better get a framer there too.
Yeah,
A framer for that weekend work, maybe a small guy that can help lay them out, things like that, because
yeah, you end up with days when the 410 guys on Friday, they're not there and you need them to do something now all of a sudden.
or vice versa. You need some electrical moved and you got no electricians on site.
So that's a great example of something that's not on the drawings, right? So it's like during pour days, or like at Purdue, right? It's a great example of making, you know, Lithgow's pouring, and you're buying Lithgow because they're in a critical path. So you're kind of, whatever their schedule is that meets our schedule, we need the MEPs to be there. So they may have not bid it with the rough end schedule, right, that Lithgow needed for them to keep moving. So so you had to buy like that, you know, when they're like, well, why do I need to be there? Well, if somebody runs over all, you know, just they protect your stuff or whatever it is. You have to know, and none of that stuff's on the plans, right? That's like understanding your logistics and your schedule and your scope and what to buy. And if you don't know, like I said, I mean, we don't know you to know something until you've done it or figured it out. So the money in here is done it.
Another one on schedule is to, if you know you're gonna work overtime, buy out the overtime up front. You're probably gonna spend less up front than you will paying T&M tickets all along, and spend $16,000 for probably 4 months of Saturday work for operators, 8 to 10 people.
Well, that goes back to the buying a duration, not a date also. Don't get caught in the trick bag of being, you know, I need you done by this date per se. Hey, I want your 5-week duration to be a 4-week duration. What's that gonna cost me? Because that kind of gets into the, just start on time, did the guy get out of the way from start on time, complete on time? That goes back to that. You're still buying a duration and not necessarily a date.
So my point in all that is, and I think we need to get better at this. We are no different than our client. Our client bought a schedule, right, start and end. If the client decides to accelerate that schedule, there's the cost associated with it. But if we generally shouldn't go to a client if there's nothing that if we're gonna miss the date because of our own doing, well, we shouldn't go after a client for more money or more time and overtime. And I think what we don't do is whoever we're paying to work overtime, we're paying them overtime generally because somebody else missed their schedule along the way. So you have to hold the first person accountable for missing their duration. And it's like, if we decide to take your 20-day duration to 15-day, well, we're accelerating their schedule after buyout, after subcontract. And yeah, if I'm a sub, we should owe them something for that. But if they are just 15 days into it and they're not 3/4 of the way done, well, I'm not going to make it, I'm going to need overtime. Well, no, get more men, or I don't care what you do. I think we need to get better at that.
Well, that's understanding how the manpower correlates to the durations that you bought. Not necessarily that you're buying the manpower, but you're understanding what manpower it was going to take to meet those agreed upon durations. So you can catch it early on in the process, hopefully 5 days into the duration when they're not meeting that production and not on day 20 of a 15-day duration. But that's understanding that stuff with them so you can put them on notice as early as possible to try to correct it.
That's what always helps to throw in some intermediate milestones, always good.
I think the other scenario is more like, hey, do we want to try and expedite a scope to beat something? You know, so maybe we're getting into winter. Hey, we want to pay more for the framer or drywaller to get ahead, so we pay less in winter conditions type scenario, which is a situation, not necessarily a failure type situation. Right. But that buyout power is during that buyout meeting.
Quality and safety for quality per plan and stock. right? Have to understand what that is. Mock-ups. Well, that's really gonna give the finished product. We talked about those ad nauseam in here. Cleanup, right? We buy it and we don't do very, well, I shouldn't say that. We try and buy it. It's holding them accountable in the field. So, you know, union markets is different, non-union markets. You have better success, different places, but
Depending on the trade, on the union thing, if you're out of town in your union, they'll clean up after themselves. And then in town here, you might as well ask a question. And we set the expectation that your electrician, as he's going through, he's not gonna open up an outlet cover plate and just drop it on the floor. He's gonna take it with him in a box.
yeah, that's all that
Because,
stuff, right.
that's fine, I get that I'm gonna have to clean it up, but I'm not gonna go around picking up just trash all over it.
Yeah, and that's expectations, and then the expectation, then it moves to the in-field operations and have that during your pre-con meeting, and then if you let them go 10 rooms with not cleaning up after themselves, like discipline of my kids. If I don't hit them the first time, they're gonna keep doing it. Why would I expect them to do anything different? So it's easier to do it, hit them upside the head after the first failure than the 10th.
So in St. Louis, are we buying all trash in a Rubbermaid dumpster?
Most of these guys probably have a body
They should have any, if you have something there, they should have no problem with
Well, you gotta buy that out, and if the place is a mess, okay, Friday's gonna be cleaned, everybody's getting a back charge.
Normally, they push back and say in a deep pile, is kind of what you tend to get.
Which is how our subcontract stays.
Yes, right.
They have to get it to a pile somewhere at our direction.
We have a training thing on back charge.
But if Anthony did it.
And on the mock-ups, you can almost buy those, I mean, you can buy it always, but I've had really good success just showing up at the meeting. A lot of times they don't have it in their bid, and just tell them how much it's gonna save them. And I've almost always gotten those for free, which helps.
Sometimes it's not, they just have a mock-up drawing on the drawing packet.
You said that you do get mock-up drawings?
More recently.
Wow.
You don't?
No, that's what they do, they're going to
I don't know if I've ever had one.
Safety, obviously all those regulations, make sure everybody's aware of our 6-foot fall protection discussion. So what's not 100% in sync with how this is going with subcontractors across the country, with marginal at best with these guys as far as implementing the standards. So it hasn't made it all the way through yet.
Anybody any luck with drywallers following it?
The big ones.
What you'll get is if you talk about it up front, they'll say, yeah, we have vacuum sanders and everything. They'll use them as they go and do all their mass work, but then once they're down to like a guy or two finishing up, they're
Well, the other thing with that too, we found is those vacuum sanders pull a lot of power. So going back to buying an electrician, now that we have that, you gotta make sure you got plenty of power to support those. If you got 15 guys running 15 vacuum sanders, that's a lot of load to them. Well, we didn't have good luck with our drywaller.
This also gets into that phasing plan like you discussed as well, something that's not on the document. The one that stands out is fall protection for the concrete guy on a panelized building. Your framer's gonna have their own fall protection, but concrete guy getting up on a deck without the next level walls doesn't necessarily have the fall protection. So stuff like that is also the next thing to buy, and safety as well. Lighting, any additional lighting, anything like that, additional power. If I'm gonna ask the framer to do these areas differently, that electrician's just kind of saying, all right, well, I've got 2 spider boxes, but we may be partitioning them off, make those inefficient if we're not complying.
Did we talk about all that?
Yeah, I got a question. Are you guys buying every CSI code out in the meeting? You're buying every CSI code out at a meeting.
I mean, as far as hauling them in here or going to meet them? You guys tell me, I'm sure
No,
there's some
I'd
things
say
you're
like
doing.
a trash chute or, certain
If you got a coffee, buy a coffee bids, one employee quote, if you got the right material, is that good? I'm sending you a contract. I see a lot of buyout meetings, and I would submit that maybe you don't have to have them all in a meeting. It can be done over a telephone conversation. Say, you're not there, I'm gonna leave you on call you 2:00 Saturday, I'd like to talk to you, go through your contract.
Right, so to answer your question, yeah, a lot of these guys, a lot of them can happen over the phone, but the bigger ones all need to be face to face. So, I mean, you guys tell me, a lot of them, they'll go when you rent a hotel and do a conference room at a hotel somewhere, we don't have a trailer set up, and you do it all day. I mean, that's what you guys did at Flagstaff, wasn't it?
But at that point, they're like toilet accessories, not gonna
Phone call.
drag 5 toilet accessories in there, unless it's a large enough scope that you can warrant.
But just use common sense, but if there's a parent low guy, just call him up, you got this, and this,
You can learn a lot by sitting across the table with somebody. See who they bring to the meeting, see what their demeanor is, part of them, like, you know, that kind of stuff.
So everybody, go ahead.
A couple other, I mean, I know we always talk about our payment and lien waiver, and that's all kind of on our buyout forms and stuff, but it's also good maybe to talk to you about GC Pay and Procore too.
So I did have that, we can talk about that now. So I did have, as part of our, I don't know if it's in our invitation to bid documents, but Procore and GC Pay should be there, and then it should be talked about at the buyout meeting. Any other general administrative requirements that we have, we are working on getting the subcontract updated to reflect those two things, but there's a few things I need to get clarified, but those should be discussed. What systems we use, but
Joint checks and waivers.
yeah, so it's not negotiable. I mean, they don't want to work for us because we use Procore and GC Pay. Just like I talked to our attorneys, like, well, did you tell them you're going to use the phone and email too? It's like, where do you stop? It's like, it's a system, right? I mean, we're all, this may be different than what you're used to using, but it's a system. That's how we do business. If an owner said, this is what we use, we're going to do it. But you should bring it up and have the discussion so they're not surprised when they have to go create a login for GC Pay and Procore.
Not everyone uses email.
Not everyone uses fax, facsimile, got one, carbon
And
paper.
that's when you don't.
Carbon copy. So that's a flag, a red flag, and you hoist up to the top of the Brinkman roof.
Sometimes the old school guys do good work for us.
Sometimes.
I want a new one.
Sub-bid analysis. So everybody's seen this, right? This is how you get everybody apples to apples.
We have a newer form than this, I think in the P files now.
Okay.
That, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
It's pretty complicated.
Might be add up like the other one.
So going back to that, so I mean, it's important that, you know, I mean, more and more jobs I've done, owners are looking for this. CA asks for it. So it's not really I'll use it on some scope. I mean, like, you have to use it for all of them. And it actually can be to your benefit because you kind of get to show the information you want to show and don't show the, because if you send them 10, 15 of these, they may look at one of them and they'll realize that we know what we're doing and then they won't look at the rest of them. But there's an art to it too, because if you do put down like, you know, CA, if you put exactly what it is, they go back because we have to show them the estimate too, so they'll start comparing. It's a little bit of an art of what you show and what you don't show.
Yeah, it's helpful to know that going in, right? Because then you only have to do that once. You don't have to make one for yourself and the one that you fancied up for the accused.
But more and more owners are looking for this stuff.
We talked about all that. There it is. Careful what you provide owner because it could be an item for them to check the box. Be transparent. But yeah, the bid analysis form is to get all your other stuff, miscellaneous this, miscellaneous that. So they don't go, well, your sub-bid analysis said you were gonna buy it for $100,000 and on the schedule of values, you're showing $150,000. where's the 50 grand? Well, you have to figure out how to get that into sub-bid analysis to get everybody apples to apples. However you guys make that magic work.
For me, I use this for, probably get my hands up, but as opposed to the buyout form, I'll pull anything and everything related to the job into the.
You wait till they have the Bob one.
Yeah, I did.
It's like, all right, you want to, now we have it recorded.
But I pull everything into that, then it just go right down the line, and it's like a got it, as opposed to trying to sit through a bunch of work.
I do that if I'm talking to someone on the phone, but I try not to print one of those out and bring it in to a meeting in case somebody's got laser eyes on the other side of the table.
I go, I mean, the thing's cool, but lower than me, but buyout forms, everybody that's locked up and out, hopefully has seen it.
So that's one thing I'd like to add. So the best tool I've found is once the sub-bid analysis is complete, funny, you can like copy the items you need and put them into the buyout form, and that's a checklist. But you really need to spend at least a half hour or so modifying the buyout form for your project versus just using whatever the template is. There's a lot of stuff on here that may not apply to your project. There's probably a lot of stuff on your project that's not on the form. So there's some prep work that needs to go in before every meeting.
Yeah, that's normally my backup plan if it's a real stagnant meeting. You know, ideally, everything gets answered on that buyout form through conversation, but sometimes you get a wet blanket and you need to kind of pull through conversation.
I mean, I more or less use that as a checklist, and then take just good meeting minutes off to the side, and it's kind of your way of skimming over questions you don't need, and, you know, you may have already talked about it through their scope review, but just a reminder.
Well, like I said again, when you're doing your check set, you should also be building this. Like, if you see a detail, some detail that doesn't look right, or doesn't look normal, I've never seen before, you gotta go, I gotta buy that. What, you wanna go bring Bob back in and ask him what your first question was on that? I was gonna say, who's gonna go, I ain't doing it. Who's gonna go change all these from every number and then put, well, number 0, start talking. Zero. Have a big light.
2, 3, top 5, come on.
Have a big light over there.
I knew it was in there somewhere, so that's cleared up.
Blindfold them.
Small talk?
Four goes to 1.
For a lot of the repeat products that we're doing too, though, I pull up previous subcontracts that have been issued on that scope and kind of read through those and see if there's any previous buyout that people have bought with subs, to get that, and I highlight those kind of ticky-tack items to make sure I cover those with it, and then it helps write a quick subcontract after the fact too. Thanks, Evan.
All right. Job book maintenance.
I check your change orders too.
So when Bob's taking on his new initiative in 2020, going around looking at everybody's job book, that have a job book, first of all, this is how it should look. So when I go to the masonry tab, there should be the latest change order, all the change orders in that, then the subcontracts, obviously everything we talked about, the buyout form behind it, then the bid analysis form, then the masonry bid, the awarded bid, and any other subsequent scope bids. All the other unsuccessful bids, they should be scanned in to SharePoint and the unsuccessful bid file. And for everyone's own benefit, the ASCII, don't tell them it's on SharePoint. So the only caveat that I have here, and I would fight Bob on it, if I have to, but well, technically it shouldn't be in here. Technically it should be in a DCD. So what I used to have is just a piece of white paper. If I knew I had the latest change order number 3, and I had 5 things that added to $20,000, I would have just a piece of white paper and list all those out on there. So when I'm doing my projection, I know latest change order 3 is $1 million. I have $50,000 of outstanding stuff. I'm projecting $1,050,000. That's how I always used to do my projection. I only needed my job book because I had all that information in it. Now, now, if you guys have that information somewhere else, because what I don't want you guys, and hopefully you're not, thinking, oh, I'm just gonna flip through my job book and that's my projection. In a perfect world, yes, that means you're up to date on every sub change order, every owner change order. There's nothing outstanding, there's nothing that's gonna happen that's gonna blow up in the next 4 months. So that's the one thing that I would say could be on top of the change orders, just to do it. And yes, I know we're trying to get away from job books. Jeremy was wildly successful at Purdue, and weaning him away from it. I haven't been totally successful.
I didn't say right or wrong, just saying what he said. His name's still inside the building.
And at the bottom of your paycheck every 2 weeks.
I'm only following that sword.
So buyout logs, is everybody using it, attempting to use it? If you haven't used it, have you not seen it? Is it useful, is it helpful? Nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about. All valid.
Yes.
I can confirm, yeah.
I confirm.
A lot of owners require it in some form or other now anyway. I know CA does, so.
So this is just letting you know who you bought, what you bought, how much you have left to buy. So, right? Checklist, kind of.
To me, I just make that a tab in my e-logs, that way everything goes in the same spreadsheet.
And is it still our strategy to delay that as long as possible?
To delay what, buyout? No.
No, the buyout log to the
I
owner.
did not. What? Is our strategy to delay buyout?
Do we have to?
Did you have to say that to Bob walked up to?
Slide number 2.
No, I mean giving the buyout log to the owner.
Oh, yeah, I would highly recommend not doing it unless you're tortured.
Don't offer, yeah.
Unless you're tortured.
Three-question rule.
If they do sandbag and launch.
Until they threaten you.
If they start asking that, put your out of office email on.
And you've been fired.
I mean, if they delays in your project, you know, they could be like, oh, well, you were late on the board, and it's like, well, no, here you go, here's my buyout log, it's all the contract.
Majority of the time, all they're doing, the lenders the ones who want to see what it is. The lenders want to see how much risk is still out there. They say, if you're halfway through the job, you only bought out 20%, and they go, shit, that's what the lenders are looking for. So if you just don't tell them like how much it is without telling them what's the dollars, but like, probably the CA wants to start seeing the buyout so they can see how much contingency is. If owners want to know what percentage bought out, that's an easy one to get. There's an art of sandbagging. If you're just going to tell them you're 95% bought out.
So,
It's usually
one other thing that I would talk about, then we can talk about anything that else in addition is, to Kyle's point, in 2015, we sent out, which, how many people were here in October of 2015? Pretty many. We sent out a memo that was the subcontract award procedure. I think that's been found for me a while back. Henry sent it to me. And it was kind of flawed in that for a certain size of subcontracts, we needed the project director to sign, and certain size contracts, we needed either me or Brian or Bob to sign. Well, I haven't signed a subcontract since I sent this out.
You just looked at them and you said, oh, no, these are good. And sent them back.
Anything over $1 million I was supposed to sign. I know that she's $1 million. But the problem with it was, the goal was to get more buy-in, and by the time I saw the subcontract agreement, we were already working right. So there's not much I could do. So we didn't really enforce this once I figured out, well, whatever, not really solving any problems. But what was attached to it was, I think, something that is a valuable tool, which is what we call this subcontract pre-qualification checklist. That if it's a sub that we haven't worked with before, we probably should, and I'll resend this out, start asking these questions. One, have we worked with this sub previously? Yes. If yes, on what jobs? And then go figure out how they performed. Company information. Who owns the company? How many years are they in business? Number of full-time field employees, which are W-2 employees? Do they belong to any industry trade associations? That might tell you they're willing to go sign up to be part of something and not get chastised because they are part of something. Current list of projects. Everybody should, like, if somebody calls up here and says, I want a current list of your projects, Stephanie or Sandy can get that to them like in 5 minutes. They should know what projects they have in their backlog. Any decent company keeps track of that. Prior project list. Just like we go to a lot of owner meetings and interviews, they say, well, send me resumes of your team, and then bait and switch me later. They don't say that, but that's what we do sometimes. So make the subcontractor bait and switch you. Let them ask them, especially on these MEP jobs that are technical, or who are your foremen, send me a resume, what projects they worked on, similar to this project. And a lot of these big projects, they have that information. They're selling to us too. References, bonding information, meaning can they get a bond?
And if they can.
And if they can, how much is it gonna cost?
That's where the bait and switch comes in. Here, I can get a bond.
But they can, if we call, like owners, you know, our bonding company has a standard letter that they can send out the door in a matter of 5 minutes that says, yes, we are the surety for Brickman Constructors, they can bond this project, yada, yada, yada. The standard form letter, they can get that from their bonding company if they have a bonding company. Financial statements, I mean, I can ask them if we're really concerned about their ability to carry this project or perform on it. Now, I probably didn't, I read their financial statements, but we can get somebody that can. So at least the answer would be, let's see what they say if you ask them for it. If they go, I don't have any, you probably ought to end the meeting.
If you call, we did it, like, if you call JD or someone over Gainesville real quick, they'll run a quick check on them and tell you everything you need to know with them. One big email.
There's one. Obtain licenses for the state the project will be located and or if required in the city. A lot of municipalities, right, depending on where you're at, they have strict licensing requirements. I mean, there's no, St. Louis, you can't, as a plumber, you can't come to St. Louis and become a plumber. You have to have a master plumber's license. I mean, Bobby would tell you that it's like a golden egg around here to have a drain layers or a master plumber's license. Safety, their EMR, which is their experience modification rating, will tell you a lot. Get that. If you get that and it's over 1, it's not good. We'll have Tim can look at that. OSHA recordable incident rate and lost time case rate, and there's any list of major injuries or fatalities they've had. Here's some other stuff. Visit company headquarters. Maybe. At a minimum, ensure it is not a P.O. box, as well as look up the address on Google Earth and determine if it's a residence. They're operating out of their house. I mean, it may not be a P.O. box, but go look it up, see where it's at. I mean, it could be their basement of their house. Visit current job sites, call the insurance provider to confirm history of claims and coverage limits. Provide to Kyle's point, provide our legal counsel, Greensfelder, with their name. They can run a search and go, yeah, this guy's been sued 20 times in the last 6 months. Well, he's probably not going to tell you that.
They're all pending.
They're not his fault either.
Yeah.
Prove it.
It's a bad street.
And then they can run a credit, our legal can run a credit rating, which will give you better business bureau, and you guys can Google a lot of this stuff and look them up. Email, is their email Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL, NetZero.
Is that how you say AOL? I thought it was OWL.
Owl, like wall, like it's LOL. There's emojis, so this is a good list of stuff to ask them during the course of if they're a new subcontractor and you're awarding them substantial subcontract. I'll let you guys determine substantial depending on the overall contract scope. $100,000 is substantial on a $5 million job. may not be overly substantial on a $75 million job.
So a lot of guys don't necessarily like fill that out because they look at it and that's a lot of work for them, right? So it's really kind of a good practice. Send it to them, like, if they're one of the guys you're gonna just come sit down with them, say, hey, I need to have it before we sit down for a buyout. At least they know that they have an invitation to a table and they're gonna be more willing to fill it out. I mean, Flagstaff, we had a guy that we were gonna sign up for like $3 million worth of work and he would not fill it out. He even came up with some story, his mom was in the hospital. And we're like, he's like, if this is gonna require me to fill this out so I get the job, I'm not filling it out. Told us everything we need to know about. And then Greensilver sent us back on information and we're glad we did sit down.
But how low was he?
$1 million. Over 360.
Very radical.
Very radical.
What else? So I'll send that back out to everybody so they have it on the top of their email next day. All right, so buyout, it sucks. It's exhausting, but it's the extra week you spend in buyout and getting detailed probably saves you a month on the back end. So if you know what, I don't know what the numbers are, but the more focus and long nights and burn the midnight oil or whatever it is on buyout at the front end and really understanding that project, right? The less, then you're just managing the project as opposed to chasing problems that you forgot about. And then up to your point, in a timely manner too, trying to build a project as opposed to buying out and building a project. Right, I guess at the beginning, I've done it both ways. Bad way is not fun, or the long, drawn-out way is not fun, and it is. You have to have laser focused and be able to stay focused on buyout. Power through it. And the hardest thing is, and I was guilty of this too, done it, is went and did all the buyout meetings, and then the next hardest step is writing the subcontract. Brutal, difficult, not difficult, just time consuming. But just there's a means to the end, and 3 or 4 or 5 months from now, it'll pay off. And you know, and if you're in the middle of buyout, and we do the best we can during our resource allocation stuff, when we assign people here and there, but if you are laser focused and you have a task of buying the project out, and somebody comes to you with something else to do, bid, estimate, tender, I mean, be honest with them. Don't overload yourself. Say, look, I'm tasked with getting this done, and let's come see me in 3 weeks or a month, and I'll be more than happy to help out. But because, right, every day you have to choose what you're doing, right? And somebody's got operations or pre-con, and so pre-con has the closest end date than buyout, so you're going to have to focus on pre-con or estimate whenever that bid or estimate is due, and you're not going to do buyout, you're going to push it off. So we expect everybody in here to let us know when you don't have capacity. We kind of guess when we think you do and don't, but it's not an exact science. Questions, comments, anything else?
Has there been any thought as to tailoring buyout forms to, like, senior living, hotels, industrial? Right now, it's like...
Can you put your hand up higher? I can't see it. Okay, now I can.
Sorry, did I take a turn?
No, you just volunteered.
Did you not learn from Kyle last week?
I'm a believer that we should.
Matter of doing it.
It's a matter of time and effort to get it done. So maybe somebody gets together, a group of senior living people and industrial people, and I mean, if you go to Inventing the Wheel, those are the groups. I mean, right, all of ours are tailored to strip retail and Walmart Lowe's, right? There's probably still something about Home Depot SWIP certification on our file form somewhere. So that's what they were tailored to, and then we just kind of reformatted them and changed the font and rebranded them and changed up automotive. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it'd be up for discussion. So I'll leave that there. What else?
Related, but Julie sent out that email about Procore certifications. Right.
I can see how that performs. But yeah, to your point, Procore certifications, get on and get them done.
March 1st is the deadline.
But that's the only reason I've been delaying training for all you guys, because any of you guys have done certifications, so I'm helping you out. Anything else operationally? Or not? Cool. That's it. Thanks for your time.
That's fair.